All right, so get this.
And
We're diving into Bitcoin security today.
With Michael Saylor
Yeah.
as our guide.
You know, the CEO of MicroStrategy, major Bitcoin advocate, like, he's really shaped how people think about cryptocurrencies.
Right, and how institutions.
Especially institutions.
Yeah.
But here's the thing.
There's a twist.
Yeah, when it comes to keeping your Bitcoin safe, Saylor might challenge what you think, you know?
Yeah, he doesn't exactly sing the praises of that, not your keys, not your coins.
Right.
Crowd.
A hardcore.
Yeah, he actually
leans
towards using custodial services for your Bitcoin.
Okay, so like trusting a third party.
Yeah.
Like a big financial institution.
Like a Fidelity, a BlackRock,
To hold it for you.
Right.
Which seems a little counterintuitive.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
At first.
Right. Totally. Bitcoin is all about decentralization.
Cutting out the middleman.
Cutting out the middleman.
Yeah.
Why would Saylor, of all people, advocate for putting your Bitcoin in someone else's hands?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
His reasoning boils down to a belief that, in today's world, established institutions might actually be more secure
Really?
than individuals trying to manage their own Bitcoin.
Interesting.
And he has reasons.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Okay.
What makes him so confident in these institutions?
Well, he points to the robust security measures that they have in place.
Like what?
So the multi-layered cybersecurity protocols,
Okay.
strict compliance requirements teams dedicated to risk management.
Uh-huh.
They're built to withstand sophisticated attacks.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot more resources to invest in security than the average person does.
It's like the difference between stashing your cash under the mattress versus depositing it in a bank vault.
Right.
The bank has a lot more
Way more.
going on in terms of security.
Exactly. And Saylor's also really big on the regulatory oversight that comes with these institutions.
Oh.
Because they operate within a regulated framework.
Mm-hmm.
They're subject to audits. They have to meet specific standards for security and financial stability.
Right.
This makes them less likely to just disappear overnight, like some unregulated platforms we've seen.
He's got to have FTX in mind.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
FTX really highlighted what can go wrong.
Yeah.
When you have centralized exchanges without strong regulatory oversight.
Big lesson for a lot of people. So the risks that come with those less regulated players in the crypto world.
He's essentially saying, look, if you want to sleep soundly at night, knowing your Bitcoin is safe, go with the established players who are playing by the rules.
So he's looking for that stability and trustworthiness that comes with big regulated institutions.
Absolutely.
But there's another layer to this.
Yes.
Right? There is
something about governments.
Government stepping in.
Yeah, potentially.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
So Saylor argues that if Bitcoin really takes off
and becomes a globally dominant asset,
like a real player,
governments might try to exert more control over it.
Okay.
And in that scenario, he believes self-custody could actually make you more vulnerable.
Really?
Yeah.
How?
He suggests that if you're holding your own Bitcoin, it's potentially easier for governments to track you down and seize those assets.
Okay.
It's like having all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Right.
But if your Bitcoin is held by a regulated institution, there are more legal hurdles and protections in place that could make seizure more difficult.
So it's almost like those institutions become a buffer.
A buffer.
Between you and potential government overreach.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Wow.
He sees it as a way to mitigate risk in a world where governments might become increasingly wary of Bitcoin's growing influence.
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is.
And this is where he uses a historical example to make his point.
Yes.
He brings up what happened to gold in the U.S. back in the 1930s.
The 1930s, yeah. Executive Order 6102.
During the Great Depression.
Yeah, President Roosevelt signed an order that essentially made it illegal for private citizens to hold gold.
Whoa.
Yeah, they were forced to sell it to the Federal Reserve at a fixed price.
So the government just came in and took people's gold.
They did.
Is Saylor suggesting that the same thing could happen to Bitcoin?
He's not explicitly saying that.
Okay.
But he's definitely using this historical event to highlight a potential risk.
Right.
It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Meant to make people think about what could happen if governments perceive Bitcoin as a threat to their control over the financial system.
Pretty heavy stuff.
It is.
But this historical parallel is actually pretty controversial, right?
It is.
Bitcoin is digital and decentralized. It's not exactly like physical gold that can be confiscated from a safe.
That's the crux of the debate.
Okay.
A lot of people in the Bitcoin community push back against this comparison, arguing that Bitcoin's decentralized nature makes it far more resistant to this kind of government seizure. They believe that even if governments tried to crack down, it would be incredibly difficult to actually confiscate Bitcoin on a large scale.
Okay, so Saylor's raising some serious questions about the security of self-custody in a world where governments might take a more assertive stance towards Bitcoin. But let's be honest, there's a whole other side to this story.
Oh, yeah, right. Huge.
The not your keys, not your coins.
It's powerful.
Mantra is a pretty powerful argument for self-custody.
It is, absolutely. And that brings us to the heart of the debate.
All right, so let's dive into the case for self-custody and why it holds such a central place in the Bitcoin ethos.
Okay.
What are the main arguments?
The core idea behind self-custody goes all the way back to Satoshi Nakamoto.
Bitcoin's mysterious creator.
Mysterious creator. The entire point of Bitcoin was to create a financial system that was beyond the reach of any central authority, including governments.
Right.
And that philosophy is deeply embedded in the minds of many Bitcoin enthusiasts. And that's where the not your keys, not your coins mantra comes in, right?
Exactly.
It's basically become a rallying cry for those who believe in the power of self-sovereignty and control over your own assets.
It emphasizes the idea that if you don't control your private keys, you don't truly own your Bitcoin.
Right.
You're essentially placing your trust in a third party to act in your best interests.
Which, as we've seen with cases like FTX, doesn't always work out.
It does not.
So what are the specific risks people point to when it comes to relying on custodial services?
Well, there's always the risk of institutional failure, for one.
Sure.
We've seen banks collapse, investment firms go bankrupt.
Yeah.
It's not inconceivable that a custodian holding large amounts of Bitcoin could run into trouble.
And if that happens, your Bitcoin could be at risk.
It's a possibility. Yeah. Or it could get tied up in legal proceedings for years.
Oh, wow.
So that's why self-custody advocates argue that the safest way to hold your Bitcoin is to be your own bank, so to speak.
But isn't managing your own Bitcoin kind of a daunting task?
It can be, especially for people who aren't super tech savvy.
It can be, no doubt you need to understand how private keys work, how to secure your wallet, and the potential risks involved.
Yeah.
It's definitely not something to take lightly.
So it's a trade-off then.
It is.
Weighing the convenience and perceived security of custodians against the control and autonomy of self-custody.
Exactly. And where you land on that spectrum depends on your individual risk tolerance, your comfort level with technology, and how much you value that sense of complete control over your assets.
Okay, so we've got Saylor making a case for institutions and the not your keys, not your coins crowd advocating for taking full control.
Right.
It sounds like a pretty stark choice.
It does.
But is there any middle ground here?
Well, there are some innovative solutions emerging that try to bridge that gap.
Like what?
Things like multi-signature wallets, for example.
Multi-signature wallets?
Yeah.
What are those?
Imagine a safe deposit box that requires 2 keys to open.
Okay.
That's the basic idea behind a multi-sig wallet. Instead of having a single private key that controls your Bitcoin, you have multiple keys, and you need a certain number of those keys to authorize any transaction.
So it's like a built-in safety net.
It adds an extra layer of security.
Okay.
You can, for instance, hold one key yourself and entrust the other keys to trusted family members or a specialized security firm.
So even if one key is compromised, your Bitcoin is still safe.
That's right. It makes it much harder for hackers or even rogue insiders to gain full control of your funds.
Okay, so multi-signature wallets offer a blend of security and control.
They do.
Are they the future of Bitcoin custody?
It's hard to say definitively. It's still a relatively new technology.
Right.
And there are different types of multi-sig wallets with varying levels of complexity.
But it shows that there's a lot of innovation happening in this space.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
People are actively looking for ways to make Bitcoin custody more secure and accessible.
It's a dynamic field that's constantly evolving as Bitcoin adoption grows and new challenges emerge. And that constant evolution is part of what makes this whole discussion so fascinating.
So it sounds like there's no one-size-fits-all answer when it comes to Bitcoin custody.
There isn't.
It's all about finding the approach that best aligns with your individual needs, your risk tolerance, and your vision for the future.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, so we've laid out Saylor's argument for custodial services. delved into the philosophy behind self-custody, and even touched on some hybrid solutions like multi-sig wallets.
We have.
But there's another layer to this debate that we need to explore.
There is.
It's a big one, and it all comes down to this. Saylor's stance on Bitcoin custody is very much tied to his outlook on the global economy. All right, so let's dive into that. How does his economic outlook shape his views on how people should hold their Bitcoin? And where does this leave the listener as they're navigating this whole landscape?
Well, that's what we'll unpack next. Buckle up, because things are about to get even more thought-provoking. Saylor's vision is rooted in a belief that the U.S. economy and really the global financial system is headed towards a period of stability and integration. Yeah, he sees custodians, especially those big regulated institutions, as the bridge that will bring Bitcoin into the mainstream.
So in his view, custodians make it easier for everyday people and businesses to adopt Bitcoin because they offer that familiarity and trust that's already built into traditional finance.
Exactly. He believes that having these established players involved will smooth out the process of integrating Bitcoin into our existing financial systems. It makes it less daunting for those who might be hesitant to jump into the world of self-custody.
It's like choosing a well-known bank over a new fintech startup. There's that sense of security that comes with a long track record and established regulations.
That's a great analogy. But here's where things get interesting. The source material we're looking at also raises a critical question. What happens if Saylor's optimistic outlook is wrong? What if the global economy doesn't head towards stability?
Right. What if things go in the opposite direction? What if we see more economic turmoil, maybe even hyperinflation, or governments becoming more restrictive with how people can use their assets?
That's where the self-custody argument starts to look a lot stronger. Because if you're facing a scenario where traditional financial institutions are struggling or governments are trying to exert more control over people's wealth, suddenly having your Bitcoin tucked away with a custodian might feel a lot riskier.
So in those kinds of scenarios, self-custody could be crucial for protecting your wealth.
It could.
Because you're not reliant on any third party. You've got complete control.
Exactly. Self-custody aligns with that core Bitcoin principle of individual sovereignty. It puts you in the driver's seat, no matter what's happening in the broader economy. You're not subject to the decisions of a bank, a government, or any other central authority.
It sounds like Saylor might be underestimating the potential for those worst-case scenarios. Or maybe he's just putting a lot of faith in the stability of the existing financial system.
That's a key point. Saylor's view is very much rooted in an optimistic outlook. But many within the Bitcoin community argue that Bitcoin's true power lies in its ability to act as a hedge against those very instabilities that Saylor downplays.
It's a powerful counterpoint. It almost feels like we're talking about two different worlds. One where institutions provide a safe haven and smooth integration, and another where self-reliance and individual control are the keys to weathering economic storms.
And that's precisely the tension at the heart of this custody debate. It's a philosophical difference as much as it is a technical one. It reflects different beliefs about the role of institutions, the nature of financial freedom, and even the future of the global economy.
So we've got Saylor with his institutional approach and the self-custody advocates with their emphasis on individual control. But for the listener who's just starting to wrap their head around all of this, it can feel pretty overwhelming.
It can.
Where do you even begin to make sense of it all?
It all boils down to a few key questions. First, how much do you trust established institutions to act in your best interests, especially in times of uncertainty?
Because the whole FTX situation showed that even big, seemingly reputable players can stumble.
Exactly. So it's about weighing that risk. Second, how comfortable are you with the technical aspects of managing your own Bitcoin? Are you ready to dive into the world of private keys, wallets, and security protocols?
Because self-custody does come with a learning curve. And let's be honest, it can feel intimidating for those who aren't already familiar with the technical side of things.
Absolutely. And finally, what's your overall outlook on the economy and the future of finance? Do you believe that institutions will continue to be the dominant force? Or do you see a shift towards more individual empowerment and decentralized systems?
So it's not just about choosing a storage method for your Bitcoin.
Right.
It's about understanding the bigger picture of where you think things are headed. It's about aligning your custody approach with your own beliefs and values.
Precisely. And remember, there's no right or wrong answer here.
Right.
It's all about finding the approach that feels right for you. What aligns with your risk tolerance, your tech comfort level, and your overall vision for the future of finance.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored Michael Saylor's controversial take on custodians, dug into the historical parallel of gold confiscation, and really unpacked the philosophical and practical considerations behind self-custody.
Yeah, we have.
And we've emphasized that this is an ongoing conversation. The world of Bitcoin is constantly evolving, so staying informed and continuing to learn is key. But here's something we haven't talked about yet. Saylor and the self-custody proponents might actually agree on one crucial point.
They might.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what's that?
Well, that's what we'll uncover as we wrap up our deep dive into this complex yet fascinating world of Bitcoin custody.
Okay, you've got me intrigued. What's this common ground between Saylor and the self-custody advocates?
They might disagree on the how,
Okay.
but they both agree on the why.
Okay.
Both Saylor and the not your keys, not your coins crowd believe in the fundamental importance of Bitcoin education.
So even though they have different views on how people should hold their Bitcoin,
Right.
they both agree that people need to understand it better.
Exactly. Saylor believes that wider adoption hinges on making Bitcoin more accessible and understandable,
Okay.
even if that means relying on trusted institutions.
And the self-custody proponents would argue that understanding the technical aspects of Bitcoin, like private keys and wallets, is crucial for taking true ownership of your assets.
That's right. Both sides see education as empowerment.
Yeah.
The more people understand Bitcoin, the better equipped they are to make informed decisions about how to hold it, use it, and participate in this evolving financial landscape.
So no matter which side of the custody debate you lean towards, knowledge is key.
It is.
It's the foundation for everything else.
Absolutely. It allows you to weigh the risks and benefits of different approaches, to navigate the complexities of the Bitcoin world, and ultimately to align your actions with your values.
To wrap things up, it seems like Michael Saylor's view on Bitcoin custody is just one piece of a much larger and constantly evolving puzzle.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, and the debate between self-custody and custodians is far from settled.
Which is a good thing, right?
It is.
It means the community is actively engaged, exploring different options and constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin.
Absolutely. This ongoing dialogue is vital for the healthy development of the Bitcoin ecosystem. It ensures that we're always questioning assumptions, refining our understanding, and coming up with innovative solutions.
And it highlights the fact that Bitcoin is more than just a technology.
Right.
It's a philosophy, a movement, a way of thinking about money and power that's fundamentally different from the traditional financial system.
Precisely, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is forcing us to rethink the very foundations of our financial world.
Yeah.
And the custody debate is just one example of how those conversations are playing out.
So as you continue your journey into the world of Bitcoin, remember that the question of custody isn't just a technical detail.
Right.
It's a reflection of your values, your risk tolerance, and your vision for the future.
Do your research, explore the different options, and ultimately make the decision that feels right for you.
And don't be afraid to change your mind as you learn more.
Exactly.
The beauty of Bitcoin is that it's constantly evolving, and so are our understanding and approaches to it. So stay curious, stay engaged, and keep exploring the possibilities. This is just the beginning of a very exciting journey.
It is a journey.
Okay, so we've delved into the complexities of Bitcoin custody, but here's a final thought for you to ponder as you continue your deep dive. We've talked about the risks of government intervention, but what about the potential for societal shifts? What if, instead of trying to confiscate Bitcoin, governments start integrating it into their own systems?
Interesting.
How would that impact the self-custody versus custodian debate? Something to think about.
It's a fascinating question, and one that we'll likely be grappling with for years to come. The future of Bitcoin is uncertain, but that's part of what makes it so compelling.
Yeah.
It's a journey of discovery, and we're all along for the ride.
Yeah.